Hello, today I'd like to show you how to make a block. I'm not sure what its proper name is, I'm just calling it a square block, using 5-inch squares today. So the centre square is a 5-inch square and there's 5-inch squares cut in half for the outside. So to make one block you're going to need 3 5-inch squares, one for the centre and 2, the way I've done it, 2 the same to go around. And I've used a stripe, which just means you've got to be a little bit more careful when you're cutting. And we're going to be trimming the block down. It finishes at a 7-inch cut block, so a 6.5-inch finished block. So I've got my centre square here, and I've got my 2 stripy blocks, squares here. Now I'm going to cut those in half, so I'm just going to lay them one on top of the other, and because of the stripes, and I want the stripes to all go like they are around, you need to cut them both the same way. So you can't cut them with the wrong sides together. You have to cut them both right sides up to get them to cut the same. So I'm just going to cut them in half diagonally. I've got one on top of the other there. And that's my square. And so now you can see that these corners are all going to go. So we're going to put them on opposite sides and then the other opposite sides. And these stripes, as you can see, are now going all around like that, which is what I was after. So in order to put the first side on, I'm going to just fold my 5-inch square, my centre square, in half and just do a finger press. You don't want to iron that line in because it could just stay there. Irons are like that. And I'm going to position this triangle along that edge with the fold coming down here. And the fold's there so that I can line my point up in that fold, so that it's then going to sit centrally. So I've got the edges level up there, the corners are sticking out there, and the point is in that little fold in there. And I'm going to take that to the machine, and just using a 1/4-inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew along that edge there. Now when you're doing this, these triangles will be cut on the bias, so they could stretch, so don't go pulling it out, just let it sit there and feed in nicely. And now I want to do the opposite one. It's easier to work in opposites for this. And that fold should still be there, so the same thing will apply. You can just lay this triangle on top and get that point to sit within that finger pressed fold. Line your edges up and back to the sewing machine to do some more sewing. Another 1/4-inch seam along here. And now I'm going to press that. I find it so much better to press as you go. So because they're a little bit awkward shapes with overlapping each other, I'm just going to lay one down flat, and I can run the iron over that whilst I'm actually pressing this seam. So I'm pressing it over, just gently, and now I can turn it around and do the same on the other side. So now we're going to sew the other 2 sides on. So again, I want my finger press line so that I can find that centre point. So line up your top and bottom and press your little line through there. And the same thing again, lay this so that those edges are together and your point is sitting in that fold down there. It's probably very hard for you to see that line. It's hard for me to see when it's on black. But your little point should be just sticking out evenly either side as well, so that's just another little area you can look at for lining up. Back to the sewing machine. And just one more to go on the opposite side. Same thing again. Lay your edges together, line your point up with that centre fold, make sure that your corners are sitting out, and back to the sewing machine. so that we can get that pressed nice and flat. So same thing again, you can leave one side down while you press over this edge. Turn it round and the same thing again. And so there I've got the block, but it's a little bit untidy at this stage, so I'm actually going to trim it down because I think that it's a little bit untidy, and there's quite a big area beyond the center square which you could leave, but I'm wanting to trim mine down. So I've got my 7-inch square, and I'm going to line that up so I've got 3.5 inches either side, and I can see through where the point is of my square inside, and I want the 3.5 lined up top and bottom and on the sides as near as possible. You have to remember we are working with fabric, and fabric sometimes has just a little mind of its own and moves around. Now you can see I'm trimming off a reasonable amount, so you probably could make it a 7.5-inch square, but I wanted to trim mine down to 7. So I've got it lined up, hold it nice and firm, and I just trim off one side, and then I can reach over carefully and trim off the other side. And now I'm going to turn that around so that I can reach, place the square back on. So now I've got 2 trimmed sides. I can line up my square with those 2 trimmed sides, and I can just double check that I'm still sitting where I want to be with my 3.5 meeting those points, and it's looking pretty good. So again, holding it nice and firm. You will have to hold it down firm because of the bulk of the seams behind. It may want to move around a little bit, so if you're having trouble with that, you can pop some little emery paper dots or something like that underneath. That often helps. So holding it nice and straight and firm, take off the last 2 sides. And there I'm very happy with my 7-inch cut square block, and I have made a few of these so that you can see that you could actually, because of the stripes, it's a little bit heavy perhaps, but you could place them together and get that stripe changing direction. And you get that because we cut the squares all the same way. If you had the squares facing back to back, you would have the stripes wouldn't be cooperating in that same way. So that would be an idea, or perhaps you could set them apart with something else. I don't know. I'm sure you've got lots of ideas how you would make your quilt. There's lots of things that you can do with that block. You could do some applique in there. I've also made some in a different colour. It was a stripy and dotty day today. I'm afraid I had to do stripes and dots, it seems. Oops, we're going that way. So that one, and I probably would not put all those together because to me that's a little bit heavy, but you might sash them. But the other thing it's also really good with is using multiple fabrics rather than just the 2 fabrics. And I've made just a couple of blocks here with a variety of colours. Well, they're all greenish, but variety of fabrics. So I've got a dark green in the centres, and I put some lighter greens around. So great for using up all sorts of colours. You could make a fabulous quilt that looked like that. And that's it. That's my square block. Thank you.